Hello, I'm Sylvia Rick. I'm the principal design architect in Sylvia Rick and Leslie Carstens. We've specialized in designing out-of-the-box type of architecture with design as the main component. We've done a number of bush camps, a history of about 30 or 40 bush camps now, and we've won a lot of awards, thankfully, for work we've done all over Southern Africa, Madagascar, even as far as India. Camp Jao, we did Jao 18 years ago. It was a competition that we won for Wilderness Safaris, who are possibly the premier safari people in the Okavango Delta. And just to pull up the handbrake for a minute, in terms of world safari experiences, I'm told right now that the Okavango Delta is the #1 place to go on safari. The most expensive, the most sought after, the best experience. Number 2 is somewhere in Kenya, Tanzania, and number 3 would probably be a sort of a well-polished machine in the Lowveld. So we were quite happy to go and do some work in the Okavango Delta again, 18 years after we had designed 3 or 4 camps there. From a design perspective, I was born in 1959, so I grew up through seeing Joburg evolve and seeing mining gear, and even driving it today. There was this romance with the way steel structures are put together. There's just a poetic beauty. And Johannesburg, for me, there were just lots of eucalyptus trees and these mining gear heads made out of steel and corrugated iron, mostly painted a kind of a burgundy type color. And next to it, there'd be a very well detailed brick building, which was the headquarters. So I've had an infatuation with steel structures and bolting steel components together, like a Meccano set, and creating not necessarily a commercial thing, but it can be commercial, but a very poetic sculptural composition out of these steel members. It's something that I grew up with. Then at some point I went to Paris to see the Eiffel Tower. And once again, that whole bolted together steel structure in this very poetic shape just struck a chord with me. So that was fantastic for us. So much so that when I was at Varsity, I went to visit a place called Iron Bridge, where the first metal bridge had been built. Also, same story. They did these fantastic gates. I went to the museum. I collected a lot of information with some lecturers. They were very grateful. It was my 4th year out. If we fast forward that, because I don't want to go on too long, the whole poetic way of using steel in a way that it's not just steel components and it's just not just commercial, that it suddenly becomes a sculpture. And if you look at the Jao project, we've had a sort of tagline which is design based on nature for a long time. So we looked at geometries in nature like blossoming flowers, radiating cores of flowers, etc. And we've had such problems with using often we use timber because it's a natural material. It has to come from a plantation and not from nature. So controlled use of timber. But the problem with maintenance is that often timber would rot or would need to be maintained. The camp, some of these camps go for a night is $4,000 per night per person. So closing a camp down to do maintenance and sometimes even rebuilding the whole camp has been a serious problem. So about 10 years ago, I shifted our firm. We tried to do some steel work, clad in canvas or clad in this, and take steel into this sort of natural environment. Jao is now about the 4th project we've done using steel, 4th large project, and we try to get the steel to look like natural forms. And when you look at the Jao photos and the architectural drawings, you will probably see that it resembles a blossoming flower or a skeleton of an animal. So there's this poetic use and final result of what the steel actually looks like. So it's a very poetic use of steel. The same way as there was a poetic, for me there's a poetic way in which this industry was being showcased with the early mining headgear and the poetic image of Johannesburg. Now for me, we're now using steel for a very poetic natural thing. So that's why we chose to use steel and on the jar camp, partly because we thought we could do the natural thing, and partly because we thought we'd have less maintenance. Partly because of what I just said, and partly because I grew up with a little Meccano set with little holes, and we built these little abstract versions of all sorts of things. But I think it's the fact, timber's also lovely, but in these harsh environments, unless you get really expensive timbers from abroad, I think it's the maintenance-free and the kind of stresses and strains and cantilevers that you can do with steel. I think the poetic shapes that were created, and the fact that we created them in Joburg out of steel, we got it sent up there, and when you look at the sculpture now, it does look like an exoskeleton of something found in nature. We've made it out of little parts, and I'm also happy that we had a great team with SE Steel. Philip's office drew hundreds of drawings of our little poetic vision. They were then rechecked, and there were lots of different companies involved. And the final product, I think people are looking at it and saying, this is going to be the best camp in the Delta. And the Delta is the best safari destination in the world at the moment. So, I don't know if this is hearsay or whatever, but I think we're onto something very special.